going on, everybody? We want to welcome you all to another lovely episode of the Counterpoise podcast. I am one of your hosts, Everett Stevenson, joined along with my other co-hosts.
Hey, everybody. I'm another co-host. I am Samantha Adams.
Hey, everyone. I am Shantae Tidwell.
Hello, everybody. I am Malik Foster, and we have a good topic for you guys today. Today, we're going to be discussing the new Illinois Purge law, as they call it, otherwise known as the Safety Act, which is going to go into effect in 2023 in the state of Illinois, which is making history as the first state to actually abolish the cash bail system for a certain amount of crimes. There's 12 different crimes that they want to list that will abolish, that are considered the non-detainable offenses: second-degree murder, kidnapping, robbery, burglary, intimidation, fleeing, eluding drug offenses, and threatening a public official. So there's a few others I missed, but that's just a list of some of them, right? So with this cash bail system, abolishment of the cash bail, the intention is that they want to be able to not detain people, because in some cases people could be caught up in the system for months or even years waiting for trial, a very long period of time waiting for trial. So they want to actually give the prosecutors 48 hours to actually come up with some sort of evidence against the person, the potential criminal, right? So that's a little bit of a mini background. Maybe y'all guys, do y'all want to kind of chime in a little bit on it?
Sure. So before we go deeper into the law itself, let me just kind of give a breakdown of the steps, right? Because I mean, typically it's like maybe slightly different in different states, but generally speaking, the steps are the same procedurally as to what happens when a person gets arrested, right? So, all right, a crime is committed, right? The police arrest somebody that they believe may have committed that crime. Whether or not they did is irrelevant. This person gets arrested, okay? Well, it's relevant, but it's not relevant to what I'm talking about. So the person gets arrested and they go to jail, okay? Every state has a certain amount of time that a person goes to jail. When I say commit a crime, I don't mean like a probation violation. I mean like it's a new crime on the books, right? Maybe they got a DUI, maybe they battery, family violence, maybe drugs, maybe murder, whatever it is. The beginning part of the process is the same for pretty much everybody, right? So they get arrested, they go to jail, and then every state has a statutory amount of time, meaning it's a certain amount of time, depending on what state you're in, for how long it takes before you have to go before a judge, okay? That's before you go to the magistrate. In Georgia, I believe it is 72 hours. Some states it's 24 hours, some states it's 48, but it's normally around that much time. When they go, that's called first appearance. So when they go before that magistrate for first appearance, the judge, that magistrate court judge, will give bond, right? Maybe they'll say that they're going to have to pay a bond amount, or they'll say you don't get bond, or they'll say you're going to be released. It's called something different in every state. Many people know it as being either called the signature bond or being released on their own recognizances. Here in Georgia, it used to be called the signature bond, but then they changed it to something called an unsecured judicial release. So typically, when that happens, you're at magistrate court. You go before a magistrate for your first appearance, and you either get bond, you get released on your own recognizances or whatever, a signature bond or whatever, or you don't get bond at all, right? Then it goes on to more steps. Like if you stay in jail because you cannot. This is what happens to a lot of people, particularly a lot of Black people, to get arrested, because so understand something. The jail is filled up with Black people, right? It's like 85 to 90% populated with Black folks, Black and brown folks, mostly Black though, okay? And let's say it's like 75% Black, okay? And then the rest is everybody else. And so what happens is a a lot of those people do not have money for cash bond. So like, let's say somebody gets arrested for something, they go to have their first appearance, and the judge gets to say how much money they have to pay for bond. I don't know if there are any states that have like a scale, but like for this, it has to be that. For that, it has to be this. I don't know. But what I do know is that the judge is who says how much money that bond is, and it's up to the judge to determine whether or not somebody gets bond, right? Some people, depending on their circumstance, will determine whether or not they can go to a bail bondsman or bonding company, right? Excuse Chino, he's getting ready to go bark. Whether or not they can go to a bonding company. Here in Georgia, if somebody has an out-of-state license, they have to pay cash bond. Bonding companies typically will not take somebody who has an out-of-state license because they believe them to be a flight risk. So with that being said, if you have somebody who doesn't make a lot of money, which is happening a lot these days because everything is so expensive and people are one step away from being homeless, right? It's not true for everybody, but it's true for a lot of people. A lot of people cannot afford a $10,000 cash bond or a $20,000 cash bond. So a lot of times they'll go to bonding companies, and if they can't get through to a bonding company, even then, if you have a $20,000 bond, those bonding companies can take anywhere from, they can take more than some states it's 10%, some is 20, somewhere in between, something like that. So like, let's say it's a $20,000 bond. Well, you're either going to be paying, you're going to be paying like $2,000, right? And then there's fees, and everybody doesn't have $2,000 just hanging around. So, you know, you run into a problem there where you have people who can't afford to get out of jail for even if it's a minor offense. It could be major, like some of the offenses that Malik just named. All of those are felonies, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I believe the Safety Act also changes with the categorization of some crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. Probably lesser felonies are going to be more like aggravated misdemeanors. I'm not 100% sure about that, but typically that's where this takes place. So the thing about it that's really important for people to understand is the Safety Act doesn't stop people from getting arrested, right? It just stops them from remaining in jail because they can't afford to pay to get out. So, and it's for those crimes, which is interesting, right? Because those crimes are more serious than, say, you know, loitering. So, you know, I just wanted to make sure I gave that little bit of background because, I mean, of course, there's more court dates because these people, like, let's say you want to plead not guilty and you don't have the money to bond out. You have to sit there in jail until your trial. And that could happen. It could take years for a trial to happen. So, you know, meanwhile, somebody's freedom is being taken from them and there's still a presumption of innocence. They haven't been proven to be guilty yet. And yet there they are sitting there. They lost their job. Some of them lose their homes. Some of them lose their children, families move on. Like they lose a lot just sitting there, especially for.
And also, you got the risk that occurs while you're in jail, right? Like, they can run the risk of committing another crime while in jail, just trying to survive. So now they can have an offense from trying to defend themselves because they're in this situation. So that's also another factor because, you know, you can be innocent, but then now you're trying to survive and there's gang politics. There's other things that's in the jail cell that may now cause an extra charge to be brought up on you, even though you wasn't even supposed to be there. But now you have a fighting, you know, charge against you or something of that matter. So, yeah. I just wanted to add that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem. So, I mean, I just wanted to make sure that our viewers know that right there is where the cash bond part comes into play. So it's not that people can be detained or arrested and brought to jail, right? That's another word for detention. It's not always how someone is detained, but that could happen, right? So, yeah, they'll sit there until trial. Trials can take forever to come, especially when you're talking about for a felony. Typically, they move faster for misdemeanors, but for felonies, it could take quite a while. And so, people are losing things. And if you are presumed to be innocent, imagine sitting in jail, having to fight for your life while in there, just like he said, and on the outside, you're losing everything and you didn't do it. You see what I'm saying? And you're losing everything simply because you couldn't afford to bond out. Everybody doesn't have family and friends. Everybody doesn't have, and even those that have family and friends, everybody's family and friends can't necessarily afford to chip in to pay to get them out of jail, because so many people nowadays are robbing Peter to pay Paul. So, I just wanted to go ahead and give that little tidbit about how it actually, how things actually work, so that when people look at the purge law, they understand that it's not just, hey, I can go commit these crimes and not go to jail. It ain't that. So here's a free piece of legal advice. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't go committing crimes think you can't go to jail. All right. Because that ain't it. So, I just wanted to go ahead and throw that in there. So with that being said, there's some pros and cons to it. So,
I do want to mention something to you guys about something that the state attorney, Robert Berlin, said. He said that he's very concerned about the increase in violent crime, but again, he stresses there's still time to fix the Safety Act. He says very fixable where we can eliminate the cash bail, but make sure that the right people in custody and everybody else who's not in danger gets out. So basically, they're concerned that it is some sort of like a purge situation where somebody could possibly commit a violent crime, such as second-degree murder. And if the state can't come up with clear and convincing evidence and fail to do so within 48 hours, that person will be released unless they violate that, and then they're detained, like Sam was mentioning earlier. So that is a little concern. That's where I guess the whole purge aspect of it's coming from, because it's not really a purge law. It's just abolishing the cash bail system. And we'll kind of get more into a little bit more of the positive reasons why they're doing this, which I think is a good thing. But I just wanted to state that from the state attorney.
Real quickly, getting into that, what you just said, Malik, the positive part of it, I think it's getting negative ramifications because of the movie, The Purge. When you look up the Purge law, the first thing that everybody is talking about in their first paragraph is the movie, The Purge. But there's some positive things that come out of this law. I think the Safety Act combats the criminalization of indigency and just being poor and not being able to afford things. It's criminalizing being poor. If I don't have the money to get out, I gotta sit. And me and homeboy with the money, we could be charged with the same thing. And the reason he could walk the street is because he got it. And that's unfair, because both of us have that presumption of innocence. So, and I believe Sam said that. So yeah, that's the number one thing I could think of, because that truly affects Black and brown people the most. And so I think this is positive for the people who honestly look like us, that have been, charged with things without having to go, the opportunity for that constitutional right to go before the court and prove my innocence. I gotta pay to get out, and I ain't got it. And so it's unfair if I ain't got it and I gotta sit in here. And just because you got it, you get to get out. And what if I didn't do it and you did?
I was
Yeah.
gonna say too, Sam. Excuse me, Shantae. One of the things that I think you had made mention to it is like penalizing people for being poor, and if this law happens to take place and catches on around our nation, we've seen that there's other states who actually have done that. If you're homeless in some states and you're loitering, they'll consider it to be loitering in certain areas. They can arrest you. They can arrest you for sleeping under bridges in some states. So, on top of what we were just referring to, you might not even necessarily have to commit I don't want to say capital offense or a felony offense, but you don't even have to make those type of crimes. And again, if it was a type of system in which there is no cash bill, or there is a cash bill system and you don't even have enough to maybe provide housing for yourself, it's very much likely that you won't have enough to be able to post that bill. And so by way of you not having a home, and again, we know how we talk about all of the high prices of home cost of living, you then become, susceptible to becoming an inmate. And, we all know how the actuation of that goes, working for pennies on a dollar and, making the state tons of money. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that last little tidbit in there and say that, I agree as far as the positivity effects of the Safety Act. And I think one thing that you brought up too earlier was the acronym behind Safety Act, right? And it stands for safety, accountability, fairness, equality, and then the T is for today. So, I think it looks to address a level of the todayness, absolutely, because you can kind of get out of there sooner than later. And then also a level of fairness as well and equality, because again, individuals who may not have the resources that others have will now have an equal right to at least have their freedom restored without necessarily having that. The safety is the element that we all are looking at to say, hey, how safe is it to allow certain individuals who may have committed more egregious crimes to be able to have access to the streets again? But accountability, I definitely think this is a step in which legislators have looked to try to take some accountability in one of the biggest disparities that we see in, the incomes of individuals who happen to be locked up. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, I was gonna say something real quick. I was gonna say that one of the positives is that the fact that they've been trying to end cash bail systems throughout, the United States for a while. Some people, some advocates, right? And this could be the first stepping stone, right? In Illinois, according to this article in Yahoo, they're saying 3 out of 5 people are just sitting in jail and have not been convicted of any crimes. So that's about 500,000 people just awaiting jail cells, awaiting trial because of lack of investigation and research. So that's a major issue in this country. So that's a positive with this law. Go ahead, Sam. I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was gonna say that you guys kind of touched on it as it relates to the financial aspect of it for the accused, right? But also too, when it comes to the jails are expensive, right? The conditions are horrible in jail. I mean, it's not supposed to be the Ritz, but some jails are worse than others, but the conditions are bad, right? For those of you who have never, when I say been in a jail, I don't necessarily mean you had to be a resident, but you could have visited someone, right? To go into a jail, you see, it's hard to live like that, right? You got all these people packed into a room, they're sharing these dorms. The beds are like this thin. The AC is always on blast. Some people go to sleep with their coats on because the heat don't work half the time. The food is terrible. They get treated like animals. Like imagine you didn't do anything and you get treated like cattle, right? Like I couldn't tell you how many times. Like it's also about language too. Like you can understand what people stand when you hear how they talk. Like if you talk to somebody that works at the jail, they might say, "Oh, if I call and I'm like, where's my client? We had a meeting. I'm supposed to see my client." oh, the inmate is feeding. Like, first of all, I get the fact that you're calling them an inmate, but that's a person. You know what I mean? And they're eating, they're not feeding, they're not cattle. You see what I'm saying? And so, and also too, the thing about it is, keep in mind the 13th Amendment, which is a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. The 13th Amendment allows for those who are incarcerated to be enslaved. It is the only exception to the abolishment of slavery. So, you know, eliminating this cash bail system does, in fact, help people to, you know, not sit there and just rot, especially when they didn't do anything. Or because also too, it forces, one thing that Malik said, but he didn't say, is it forces the police to do their job, right? I mean, if they're just trying to inconvenience you and mess up your day, they're gonna go ahead and charge you anyway with whatever, right? But it forces people, it forces the police and the prosecutors to do their job, to ensure that if you're taking away somebody's liberty, you are taking it away and it's valid, right? Because you know, we have the Constitution of the United States, right? We have all of these rights, yada, 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 yada. But one thing that we are required to have is liberty, right? Whenever your liberty is affected or taken away, your freedom, that is like at the top of the list of all things, right? So, you know, I think that people really need to be mindful and recognizing that, you know, this affects people's freedom. And when I say that jails are expensive, it could cost $2.30 something cents a minute on the phone, right? So if your family member is calling you just to tell you, hey, I'm here, that could cost $2. People don't have $20 for a 5-minute phone call. You see what I mean? Or it costs money to do things like buy underwear, socks, toothbrush, you know, just toiletries, you know, bare necessities. And so, although that takes money out of the jail, people get to keep that money so that they can put it back into the economy, whether it be keep their job, pay their bills, you know what I'm saying, buy their kids stuff, things like that, buy food, because the food there is horrible too. So, you know, there's all of these different things that come with going to jail, and how it helps to save people money. It helps them mentally, because jail will mess somebody up mentally, mess them clean up. And so it also helps to preserve your mental health as well. So those are just some of the benefits to, you know, getting rid of the cash bail system, I mean the cash bond system. So, you know, I just wanted to go ahead and throw those out there as well. I do know that there are also some negatives, right?
No, hold on 1 second. I just wanted to say another thing that I think that this also could potentially prevent is lawsuits against the state, right? One of the things that we've seen happen is a lot of times some individuals are able to sue the state based off of being locked up, I want to say wrongfully in prison. And those lawsuits cost states, you know, millions of dollars at times, depending on the actions that was taken in order to necessarily lock that person up. So if we are able to, you know, have this type of system that will now, you know, allow people who the evidence isn't as strong, you know what I'm saying, but it doesn't necessarily hold them to be bound to be locked up, then this could allow for potentially less lawsuits that we have seen from individuals who have lost their life, or lost years behind jail, in a case in which they clearly was innocent, or that, you know, the evidence wasn't strong enough to really hold them, but, you know, they just wasn't able to post bail, or they didn't have anybody look thoroughly at, you know, their the evidence of their case while pending, you know, their trial. So yeah, I just want to add that.
Yeah, I was gonna add the one thing that the study showed that, you know, awaiting your pretrial release leads to a higher chance of getting rearrested, right? So if you're in jail waiting for your pretrial, the pretrial if you're if you're detained waiting for trial, and then afterwards you're released, that leads to you being arrested. Excuse me.
Yeah, which increases the recidivism rate.
Right.
So right, and you're absolutely right about that, right? So when people are desperate, they do desperate things, right? And if, let's say, somebody is 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and then they get arrested and they lose everything, that creates an atmosphere for them to actually go out and do more, whether it be to steal or rob or whatever, because now they got to eat. They got kids to feed. They're trying to not be homeless, things like that. And so it does create an atmosphere for that recidivism. Or maybe they'll go out and sell drugs and, because they're trying to make money. And it doesn't make it right. It just means that these are the kinds of things that happen when you push people's backs against the wall. And you're talking about, a group of people whose backs are already up against the wall. Like, we're already struggling. So, and when I say we, I mean as Black people. And because also too, the thing about the criminal justice system is sometimes it doesn't matter how well off you are to get incarcerated. So one of the things that I was going to touch on going into that is the negative aspects, right? Let's say you have the money to bond out. That doesn't stop you from getting locked up. And the thing about this particular law is it's interesting about the crimes that they chose, right? Like, the crimes that they chose are all felonies. They're pretty severe. Like, second-degree murder is up there on the list. You see what I'm saying? And so it's like, I feel like you could literally lessen the amount of people in jail by not requiring a majority of misdemeanor charges to have a cash bond, or a cash bail rather. You see what I'm saying? Like, if somebody's in jail for a DUI, why do they need to have a $5,000, $10,000 bond or bail or bond? If somebody's in there for loitering or criminal trespass, and when I say criminal trespass, I don't mean standing, well, I mean, I do mean that, like standing in the store and they told you to leave and you won't go. But what about criminal trespass, damage your property? Like, you get into an argument with your significant other and a glass gets broken, throw the glass across the room. Oh, now you're going to jail. Going to jail and you can't afford to get out because now your bond is $3,000. Like, you know what I mean? For a 30-cent glass. And so I think that it's important. I think that, I don't know the rhyme or reason in which they use to select which crimes will go on that list. And I'm curious that if this particular law ends up going from state to state, whether or not those other states are going to choose different crimes. Because I think that right there is what makes so many people up in arms about it, because of the crimes on the list. Like, people don't understand the rhyme or reason behind it. I think the only thing I can think of is really because they are more they're harsher crimes, the harsher charges, the sentences typically are heavier, is because of the seriousness. You need to be more sure than to just be having people sitting around in jail and you don't even know. So, I mean, I do find that to be kind of a negative, because if the goal is to eliminate cash bond and for it to affect those indigent people who can't necessarily afford it, why not? Many indigent people have misdemeanors, and so those are just misdemeanors, and I think that it would be very, very helpful to try to help them out too.
Right. I was going to say another negative is obviously, what the state prosecutor was saying, right? The state attorney of Illinois was saying the fact that, in theory, a lot of people could commit some serious crimes and be released if the prosecution came upon that clear, convincing evidence and commit another crime. But the thing that also can back that up is if they violate that, they can be detained. So that's another thing. But I think the state state attorney, he just wants it to where, it's kind of right the first time. because you don't want to detain people for weeks and months at a time waiting trial. So that pre-trial detention, you want that to go down because you can't have 500,000 people just waiting weeks and months and there's not enough evidence to keep them detained.
Right. Before you guys jump in, I wanted to give an example about the cash bond system and how things can go incredibly wrong, right? Khalif Browder. I don't know if you guys remember Khalif Browder, but Khalif Browder was a kid out of New York, and he was accused with stealing. He was leaving a party. He got stopped by the police. They thought it was going to be a regular stop and frisk and let him go, but it wasn't. Khalif Browder was arrested because some guy who's from like Central America or something accused him of stealing his backpack. Khalif Browder never saw this dude before, never touched his backpack because he was at a party at the time that this dude's backpack was allegedly stolen. Khalif Browder was then arrested, brought to Rikers Island. Mind you, he's a teenager. He's like 15. He's a baby, okay? Brought to Rikers Island. He was originally put in the juvenile portion of the facility, which is honestly probably worse than the big boy jail, okay? They tried to recruit him to gangs. He was constantly fighting, all kinds of stuff. Now, when Khalif Browder was maybe a few months earlier, he had gotten in trouble because him and his friends decided they wanted to go for a joyride on an ice cream truck. And so he got probation for that. He was on probation. He got bond for this alleged theft of the backpack. And what happened was, everybody say hi to Chino. What happened was he, while there, he had a bond and then they took it. They took the bond back because they said that he violated his probation. Now, he would have bonded out before they took it back, before they violated his probation, but it was so high and his family couldn't afford it. His father could, his father didn't want to pay it, but the rest of his family couldn't afford it. And by the time they got that money together, they took his bond away. Khalif Browder sat in jail for, I feel like a couple of years, no trial. Every single time he went to court, prosecutors kept pushing it back. He had a public defender. Public defender wasn't fighting hard enough to say no more. He's been sitting there long enough, right? There's a judge that's a TV judge now, but she was not a TV judge at the time. She's on this TV show, I believe it's called The Hot Bench, with two other judges. I can't remember the woman's name, the judge's name. She's a white woman. And when he got before her, I think twice. The second time she was like, he's been here for way too long. If you guys are not prepared to move forward, release him now. And they weren't prepared. So he was released. And this was after he had been in jail. He had been placed in solitary confinement, all of this stuff, all because he couldn't afford bail. Mind you, like President Obama at the time, when he learned about the Khalif Browder story, he made it so that you cannot put children in solitary confinement because it messes up your mind. Long story short, Khalif Browder and his family decided to sue the state and sue the city of New York, Rikers Island, because he was getting beat up by officers and inmates. And he tried to kill himself several times. They almost let him die a couple times. And during the pendency of that case, while he was out and going to counseling and trying to do everything to get his life back together, he killed himself. So that's just an example of what the cash bond system does to people, okay? And I wanted to make sure I threw that out there before I forgot. And so, I mean, if you're gonna fix it so that it works. If you're gonna change it so that it works. So I wanted to kind of just throw that out there as we're talking about the negative aspects.
That's a perfect example, Sam, of the negative implications of this, the law. I want to say it is a money aspect to this that we really haven't spoken on. This law affects pockets. It affects the state's pockets. It affects bail bondsmen's pockets because in theory, before this law came into play, it was an incentive to get your money together, especially if you was going to have, if you're going to be accused or if you're going to be committing crimes, get your money together. Well, some people didn't, as you know, as we stated, some people don't have it, but it was an incentive to do whatever you can to get your money out, to get your money so you can get out. So when you, this particular Safety Act is going to, it's taking away that money, right? It's taking away that money aspect. And so a lot of people who, and a lot of articles have been saying, a lot of Republicans are saying that it's taking money out of the economy. So that is a negative. So that can be seen by some, not me. It can be seen by some as a negative aspect, because that money is now not going to the state anymore. Yeah.
Hey, you know why I made that face, Shantae? I made that face because a lot of Republicans invest in private prisons and private jails. So the money is not necessary. The problem is that their concern is not the money is coming out of the state income or whatever. It's that it's coming out of their own pockets. And that right there is the problem. You're on mute, Shantae.
They can't say that. They have to dress it up and make it real pretty. Sure. I can't say, dang, y'all hurting my pockets. Wait a minute. I don't like this one.
I'll say it for them. It's hurting their pockets and they don't like
it. Yeah, so basically that is a negative implication of the act that some are seeing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with that. You know, to the point as far as other negative implications, like we said, it was just a safety because of the fact that, you know, and I'm sure we referenced this, that some of these are, you know, felony offenses. And if individuals are able to post that money because they are able to have bail, and Shantae, I believe you spoke to this offense earlier, where there was an individual who was released early in Memphis and who committed for kidnapping and then committed another kidnapping prior to. So, you know, there is a chance that individuals may go back to doing some of the same things that they have done. And if they have the resources to, well, in this case, they may not necessarily even need the resources to post bail. They may be able to do such. That is one of the things that could potentially be a problem with this law. But overall, though, I think it does offer a great benefit to majority of the people who happen to be locked up due to the fact that they don't have, you know, adequate funding. Excuse me, to post bail. So. I just want to put that contrast in there. All right. So yeah.
Right. I just wanted to say some of my overall thoughts about the cash bail law, the Safety Act. I think it's a good thing. I think abolishing it is a good move. I hope other states follow. Of course, you know, there's some concerns about the pretrial releasing of some people who have committed these crimes. But I mean, when you have about 500,000 people awaiting trial and they're saying there's not enough evidence for them to be detained right currently in custody, that's an issue, right? You know, that pretrial detention is an issue. So you can't have 500,000 people waiting trial, waiting weeks and months, maybe even a year or more, just sitting there, right? And, you know, when the study shows that, you know, when you're detained and you're waiting for pretrial, you're more likely to commit a crime. So that's another issue. So I think this is a step forward to helping people. And it's also targeting Blacks and people who are indigent or, you know, lacking in financial resources, poor people in poverty. So it's definitely an attack on Black people and people in poverty and other minority groups. So abolishing this is a step in the right direction for Black people and for other groups as well, especially people who are in poverty.
Yeah, I think overall it is a good thing. I think we're going to see some fine tuning happen with it. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens in what other states it goes to. Like it takes effect, something similar to it goes into effect in. I can definitely see that happening in some of the more liberal states first. The only way I see that happening in more conservative states, like a lot of the southern states, is if like the federal government requires it because they're gonna fight that tooth and nail. But I can definitely see it happening in places like California or Massachusetts, or you know what I mean, like places like that. Because those are some of the most some of the most liberal states in the union, right? And so I think it may need fine tuning. I think just that's just from my own experience as a indigent criminal defense attorney, right? Everybody don't have that experience. So with that being said, I definitely think that some fine tuning is going to have to go into it. Like I do think that they need to reconsider which crimes and to what degree, right? I think if the issue is that because there's more at stake, I do believe you absolutely need to have more than just the word of some person to try to keep somebody in jail for all that time. I absolutely think that. I think there has to be more evidence. But I also think that if part of the purpose of the law is to lessen the amount of people in jail, you got to do more than that. Like you got to figure out something else, because at the end of the day, it's not going to really alleviate the jail population. And the jail population in part is one of the problems that create the safety concerns that Evan was talking about earlier. So again, overall, I think that it's a good idea, but I do think that there's probably going to be some tweaking going on. Not twerking, tweaking.
Yeah, I just want to go ahead and give my last little thoughts on the topic real quick, and saying that, again, I think that ultimately that the cash bond is going to be effective for providing a lot of individuals opportunities to be released prior to their jail time, especially for individuals who may be wrongfully either charged with these crimes. And then I also want to say that while I do understand, because there's another thing that was going on with this purge law, which I think we had to touch bases on, and it kind of stated how individuals would be more so required to use whatever demands that they feel like they need to do in order to remove individuals like trespassers off of their property. And so that is one thing that I do think could have a negative effect, because as we know, as attorneys, sometimes the way you do certain things can have an effect on, you. So you could be trying to defend your land, but if you defend it too egregiously or aggressively, now you can be charged for just, trying to protect your property. So we definitely need to watch out for those type of situations that can occur, even though, because as we've seen in times today, people are a lot more quicker to take rash decisions and make more hastier decisions. And a lot of times it escalates a lot faster than it needs to be. But, in all due respect, I think we all can agree, like we said, the cost of living is extremely high. So a person asking somebody to get out their house, it might be one quick ask, and then after that, they can possibly be willing to go to taking more extreme measures. So I definitely think that's something that we can see that can become a problem, is that more people become more vigilant in the way that they look to address certain harms that may be done about them. So that's something I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what takes place out there in Illinois and how that state addresses those things. But yeah, those are some of the last little thoughts I have on this topic. It's interesting to see, and I'll definitely be keeping a close eye on them over the next year or two.
Really quickly, mine's so super quick, it's going to hurt you. I agree with it. I hope more states pick it up. And I hope we could just clean it up, tune it up, like getting, your first car. It ain't brand new spanking and off the lot. You got to go, tune it up a little bit. That's cool. I'm with it. It helps people that look like me. It helps people who may not have money. I'm with it.
There you go. So I want to just go ahead and try to get us closed out a little bit. First, I'm gonna go ahead and go do our motivational minute. Our motivational minute, I have a quote by somebody by the name of Khalil Gibran. I'm not sure if I'm mispronouncing his name. If I am, I apologize. Because names do matter. But the quote says that life without liberty is like a body without a spirit. And the reason why I chose that quote is because when you're talking about the cash bond system, the cash bail system, and the way that it affects the liberty of others, it literally can drain years off of your life, drain you of your spirit, drain you of your financial livelihood, and it can have a negative impact on your family and your mental health and so many other things. And so I think that it's important that we go ahead, that they move forward, because I really would love to see what happens to it and what happens with it and what types of impact that it has, not just on the Black community, but on the criminal justice system as a whole. Because although Black and brown folks are affected the most, it's also geared to just not help the poor or the indigent, right? Excuse me. And it also gives people an opportunity to get help. Like, because sometimes people get arrested and they're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. I don't ever want to get put in this situation again. And they'll change their lives, or they'll go out and they'll go get the help that they need so that they can avoid ever going back to jail. And so I think that's why I chose that, because, in order for us to continue to grow, flourish, and all that, we need to have that spirit. We don't need to be downtrodden, beaten up, and all banged up all the time, right? Just victims of everything all the time. We don't need to be victimized, and we don't need to play the victim either, because I believe Black people are resilient, and I believe that we're strong, and I believe that that's the reason why we've made it this far in the world. So that's the motivational minute. I wanted to just put that out there and just remember who you are. You're great, right? And as far as our Black Book of the Month, it's The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter Goodwin. I'm sorry, what is his last name? Carter G. Woodson. I've got to look it up. My bad. It's posted right here. You're going to see it in just a second if you didn't already. So check that book out. It's a good book. It helps you to unlearn some of the things that you need to unlearn and teach you the proper way to learn the things that you do, especially as it relates to edifying yourself as a Black person here in America. And the Black Business of the Month is the New Black Wall Street, right out here in Atlanta, Georgia, actually over there at Stonecrest, where it is a place for entrepreneurs to come sell their things. So y'all go ahead and make sure when you're in the Atlanta area that you go check out the New Black Wall Street. And so, thank you. It's Carter G. Woodson. Yeah, sorry, it was driving me crazy. But anyway, because I read it and it's a good book. So y'all check those things out. And with that being said, want to just go ahead and close out. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Make sure you check us out every single Wednesday, or just about every single Wednesday, right around 8:30-ish. Sometimes we'll be on CP time, but it's all good because we still love you and we do it for y'all. We do it for us, but we do it for y'all. Check us out on IG for our What's Up Wednesday segment, where you can interact, you can jump in, chop it up with us, all that good stuff. If you guys have any topics that you want to talk to us about, talk to us about or have us talk about, you can go ahead and send us a DM. You can email us, all that good stuff, and we'll talk about it. But also, too, all of our socials are going to be posted up at the end. So you make sure you can go ahead and DM us there, like, share, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, and all that other good stuff. We love y'all. Be good to each other. And make sure you tap in with us on Wednesday.
Peace out.
Peace.
See y'all.
Bye.